While setting up a Van de Graaff generator to produce large sparks like this is interesting, in fact, Van de Graaff generators can be set up to produce a wide range of interesting demonstrations. This video will show several of those. Which is not to say that arcs aren't interesting. If you use a dark background and darken the room, get close enough, you can see some remarkable detail in the arcs. Unfortunately, they come and go so quickly, it's difficult to see their rich detail. By setting a camera with a macro lens so you can get very close and a very high ISO setting, you can freeze the images by opening the shutter before an arc occurs and then closing it afterwards so that the arc exposes itself. When you do that, you can catch images such as the following. The rule of thumb in why the arcs take on such complex shapes is that they always want to follow the path of least resistance. The problem is the non-uniformity of the electric field and non-uniformities in the composition of the air through which they're traveling makes the patterns they create, the structure of the arcs, extremely complicated and difficult to understand. I found there are three main types of structures. The first is the hot white, well-defined arc. The second is a glowing pink channel of arc. And then finally, the lighter blue, which are more diverse paths of conductivity. I call this one the wine glass. To see why, turn your head to the right. One of the classical demonstrations with a Van de Graaff generator is to have a young girl with long hair hold her hands on the generator and then turn it on, and the hair sticks straight out and she looks very funny. This can make a good demonstration, but unfortunately a lot of things can go wrong. Most importantly, if the girl takes her hands off of the generator too soon or at the wrong time, she can get a rather strong spark, which, while it won't injure her, will sting quite a bit. And if she's very young, it could make her cry. This is not good. Additionally, that demonstration is very temperamental about the environmental conditions and the conditions of the girl's hair. It has to be very clean and dry. The humidity has to be very low. Most of the time what happens is that some of the hair sticks out, it's lopsided, it doesn't look very good. A much better solution is to use one of the demonstrators made for that effect, using silk thread. This is what it looks like. The problem with this demonstration is that while it works and it's very reliable, it doesn't have much of a wow factor. Here's how you can improve things. A much better display uses 1/2-inch wide strips of tissue paper about 1.5 feet to 2 feet long. This is particularly funny if you add a couple of googly eyes. All of the demonstrations in this video work pretty much the same way, and that is simply that electrons pumped up from the bottom of the Van de Graaff generator build up on the sphere at the top and then collect on whatever objects you add to them for the demonstration. And because like charges always repel, they push whatever object you have, in this case strips of paper, outward as far as possible. If your audience is young children, one thing that always seems to make them laugh a lot is to alternately discharge the large globe to make the hair collapse. A more interesting demonstration involves moving your hand in towards one of the strands. If you move the flat of your hand in, they'll be attracted. But if you move a finger in, It'll start to get attracted, and then it'll actually repel them. What's happening is with the flat of your hand, the field in your hand is very uniform and very weak, so it doesn't repel them so much. But the finger being pointed concentrates the field strong enough to actually cause them to be repelled. The girls in the audience might enjoy this variation of giving Barbie a perm. I call this the zap job. Another interesting experiment is to tape a small water bottle filled with water to the top of the Van de Graaff generators. The generator will create sparks along the inside edge of the water bottle and will actually electrically charge the water just like you charge a capacitor. This one's a little dangerous because the water bottle will collect a strong enough charge to give an uncomfortable shock, but also it's hard to discharge it. After you're done, roll the water bottle around on the ground and touch the outside surface all over with the discharging wand, or you could get a nasty surprise. The longer you let it run, the stronger the water inside the bottle will collect the charge. The electrostatic pinwheel is another very interesting demonstration of electric fields and what they can do. In this case, the long arms have their tips bent at a 90-degree angle and then sharpened. As charge is funneled into the pinwheel, it collects on these sharp points and creates an electric wind that actually pushes the pinwheel around. A Van de Graaff generator will also attract a flame. I've heard two theories for how this works. One is that the charge on the collector attracts the flame because it's partially ionized. Another is that there is a steady inflow of positive ions from the air towards the negatively charged collector. Either way, it's an interesting display. If you can darken the room, an interesting demonstration is to bring a fluorescent light close to the generator. I always mount mine on the end of an insulating rod because I don't like getting shocked. And if you hold the fluorescent light in your hand, you will get some shocks. In this demonstration, bubbles blown towards the Van de Graaff generator will do one of two things. They'll either pick up enough charge in the air and be repelled, blown away, or they'll get so close to the Van de Graaff generator that they're actually sucked into it. I recommend doing this demonstration at the very end of the day because bubble solution invariably gets on the Van de Graaff generator and needs to be cleaned off before you do any other demonstrations. Another trick is to drop a small square of a single layer of Kleenex onto the top. It should be attracted, will pick up a charge when it hits, and then be repelled. One of the most interesting things you can do is to bend a wire into a loop and then through the insulation create a hole using a very fine pin. When you get the RPMs of the Van de Graaff generator just right in the distance, what you'll create is a jet, which you can see here. It has a very interesting high buzz to it that is completely different than the snaps of regular arcs. Let's take a closer look. Open shutter photography at high ISO brings out the true beauty of these jets. Although the jet can't be seen when the lights are on, its effect can be shown by bringing a candle flame up to it. There's actually a physical air current. And if you get it just right, it'll actually blow the candle out. In this demonstration, a stream of water brought close to the generator's collector will attract and bend the stream of water. An electroscope is a metal box inside which there are two very thin sheets of metal which repel each other when they're exposed to either ionizing radiation or, in this case, an electric field from a Van de Graaff generator. The problem with these devices is that a Van de Graaff generator, even at its lowest setting, creates too strong a field and tends to overpower the electroscope. Another issue is that it doesn't have much of a wow factor. The red silk string device is a better demonstration, easier to set up, and is more entertaining. A more interesting and active variation of the electroscope consists of two pith balls coated with electrically conducting paint. These pick up mutual charge, repel each other, and tend to dance around much more actively and are easy to watch than the electroscope. Much more entertaining are Franklin bells. These were designed by Benjamin Franklin. Originally, they would be attached to the lightning rod at a house, and when they started ringing, they would warn the occupants that there was a danger of a lightning strike. How it works is that the bell on the left has a strong charge, whereas the bell on the right is connected to ground. The pendulum in the center is originally attracted to the bell on the left, hits it, picks up a charge which repels it to the other side, which grounds out its charge, so it's attracted back to the left side, and that sets up the constant ringing. These devices can work without connecting the right side to a ground. However, they tend to be very erratic. They'll operate for a few seconds or minutes, and then all of a sudden they'll stop, and after a minute or so they'll start up again. Using a ground wire greatly increases the rapidity and consistency of how Franklin bells work. Voltas hailstorm is an attractive display. The Van de Graaff generator charges the bottom plate. The foam spheres with a conducting surface pick up that same charge, are repelled, shoot up to the top where they lose their charge, fall down, and repeat the process. The dancing snake is popular with children. and safe for them to use. The ribbon is a 1/4 inch wide strip of aluminized mylar taped to the end of an insulating plastic rod. They hold it just close enough to the Van de Graaff generator so that the tip of the piece of mylar doesn't quite touch the globe of the generator. As it gets close, it picks up some charge, is repelled, moves away, loses the charge, and is reattracted to repeat the process. Working under the same principle as the dancing snake is the orbiting ball, an aluminized plastic Christmas tree ornament at the end of a string is held so that it can bounce off the Van de Graaff generator. Every time it hits, it picks up a little of the charge and floats above it. After it loses some charge, it falls back and strikes the generator globe again. Under the right conditions, the sphere will actually orbit the globe of the Van de Graaff generator just like a planet orbiting the sun. Except in this case, it's the force of repulsion that's making it orbit instead of gravity's force of attraction. A similar demonstration can be made using a mylar helium-filled balloon, and it's much more visible. This won't work with a regular rubber balloon because the balloon will hit once, pick up a charge, and then it won't lose the charge, so it will never be reattracted to the Van de Graaff generator. One of the most interesting demonstrations of electrostatic force is the electrostatic motor. Spheres opposite each other have the same charge, but diagonally have the opposite charge. As one of the smaller spheres on the armature comes near to this post, which has a sharp wire extending outward, it picks up a little bit of charge. That makes it repelled by this one and attracted by this one. As soon as momentum carries it past, the charge is reversed, and again it's repelled by this one and attracted by this one. These can be made out of almost anything, including 2-liter plastic soda bottles. One of the best demonstrations with a Van de Graaff generator is to simply stack a pile of aluminum pie pans on the very top and then turn it on. That never fails to get a smile out of the kids. A similar and much messier demonstration is what I call the Rice Krispie Volcano. Tape a plastic container to the top of the Van de Graaff generator and then pour in a small handful of Rice Krispies. Connect a cookie sheet to the top electrode of the Van de Graaff generator. Place a piece of dry ice at one end and fill it with warm water. Then, if you lower your finger towards it, an electric wind will be created that'll blow the fog away. If you pour off the water, but leave the surface damp of the previous experiment, you'll notice that small stalagmites will start growing up. These are ice crystals forming out of the moisture clinging to the surface of the cookie sheet. They're driven upward because they pick up a charge and are repelled. Because it's so sensitive to the shape of the object to be levitated, the plate spacing and speed of the Van de Graaff generator, Electrostatic levitation is one of the more difficult demonstrations to put on. In this case, I used 2 cookie sheets, 7 inches apart, and the little spaceship that's being levitated is 2.5 inches long and 1.25 inches wide. I found a bullet shape to the top nose works the best. If you make this a semicircle, it tends to cling to the top electrode. The top electrode is connected to the upper electrode, or the negative electrode, of the Van de Graaff generator. The bottom cookie sheet is connected to the Van de Graaff generator's ground. I found 3 prongs on the bottom work the best because you can bend the 2 outer prongs one way and the middle prong the opposite way, and this creates a tripod to rest the little spaceship on so that it can get off to a good start. Setting the Van de Graaff generator to higher RPMs, I found, helps the spaceship to levitate more in the middle of the space between the 2 plates. If you run it slower, the spaceship will tend to cling more to the top electrode. As these demonstrations have shown, Van de Graaff generators are wonderful devices, both for home use and school demonstrations. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.